I knew it was coming for me even though I couldn't see or hear it. While the man spoke, the angel's hands danced across golden hieroglyphs, causing them to light up and shift positions in response. I sprang into motion, howling and kicking with all my strength, in the middle of an enormous feeling of panic. Blinding flash of light overwhelmed me out of nowhere. In that instant, I felt like I had entered paradise. The protagonists of today's story are the rapper Cody and his near-death experience and subsequent plunge into hell. In case you haven't been watching, we're attempting to share the good news of God's kingdom by highlighting real testimonies from Christians all across the globe. Stories about Jesus, the afterlife, heaven, and hell are shared every week or two, along with other topics from the Bible. Your continued patronage of the channel means the world to me. Okay then, today's storyline will commence. From an early age on, my relationship with the Lord was solid. Nighttime became a battleground when I was a child due to the terrible presence of demons. Going to bed used to be something I dreaded once my parents had locked the door and turned out the light. The tormentors included a particularly ghostly demon that had pig-sized tusks and a hatchet for an oral weapon. I could always sense its existence, even though my sense of sight never permitted me to see it. Even though I could see its size and direction, the image of it slicing at me with the hatchet continued to haunt me in my dreams whenever I closed my eyes. I continued returning to my parents for relief from the excruciating agony, which prevented me from getting any sleep. My mom eventually admitted that my fears were well-founded. Despite her initial doubts, she educated me on the value of praising Jesus by name. The fact that I didn't find out about it until much later is probably due to my youth. But the demon showed up one night after my mom kept shutting my door and turning off the light. At that moment, I gathered all my courage and prayed to Jesus. Suddenly, everything changed. In a fit of terror, the dreadful, stifling presence ran away. I imagined an angel descending to banish the monster from my head as a tremendous surge of strength swept over me. As the comforting presence of the living God replaced my fear, a wave of serenity swept over me. I took comfort in the knowledge that the name of Jesus would rescue me in moments of terror. Listening to my heart, I prayed to him. As time went on, my environment transformed. Even more challenging were the times when my attempts to speak out about my faith at public school were ignored. My beliefs were always out in the open, but I was too proud to acknowledge my own frailties. I let minor lapses in my faith to accumulate and eventually lead me wrong. Growing up in a drug-ridden region was my reality because no one was around to protect me. My dad put in long hours at the office, and my mom had a history of heart problems and strokes, so she was always working. On my free time, I loved hanging out with my pals and going on rides on my dirt bike. My generation enjoyed a wonderful community, just like the kids in the Sandlot. The influence of my peers swiftly trumped my best intentions. Sharing Jesus with the community seemed like a good idea at the time. Whatever the case may be, I learned interesting things about the world outside my home thanks to them. We gave in to the compelling allure of these unexpected meetings. My naivete led me astray, and I found myself immersed in a drug culture and way of life that were drastically different from my childhood. I have never denied Jesus or abandoned my faith, no matter how deeply I sank into sin. Because my love for Jesus remained constant, I never considered turning back. I yearned to be at his side even while I made choices that led me astray. As I saw the man I had transformed into, I couldn't help but feel guilty that the Lord was observing and considering the disappointment felt by my loved ones and family. On one particular day, I struck rock bottom somewhere around the Colorado Springs town of Fountain. I remained home alone with my heroin addiction while my wife went out to watch the kids. In my many prayers for help in ending my drug use, I prayed that the Lord would spare me the agony of withdrawal, so that I could finally stop the habit. Because of this, I became dependent on drugs, whether methadone or painkillers. to function daily. As a direct consequence of the Holy Spirit's conviction, I am unable to find joy in my drug addiction. I cried out to the Lord for help in my never-ending pain at every hour of every day. During withdrawal, I would often crush 5 10-milligram pills, snort them, and then take 10 more. This evening and morning practice would go on for years unless I could obtain different drugs. I made a sincere effort to emulate my father, a devout Christian who abstained from smoking and profanity, as well as my pastor, Pastor Dan of Good News Church in Nampa, Idaho. Their virtuous lives were incomprehensible to me, but I wanted to be a man of God. Just this one more time won't hurt. That's how I ended the vicious cycle of abstinence and relapse. After taking my 15 methadone 10s as prescribed, I suddenly felt completely normal, with no euphoria, high, or withdrawal symptoms. In the depths of my sorrow and self-loathing, I faced a fatal decision. I decided to down multiple double shots of Everclear because my reasoning thought was hazy, or maybe I simply forgot. I didn't want to end my life, but I was so down that I didn't think I deserved to keep on living. The weight of my transgressions and shortcomings made me feel as though Jesus was punishing me. I felt like an endless slob as I reached for the Everclear, teetering on the edge of insanity. Mistaking it for a regular shot glass, I reached for a double shot glass by accident. I failed to anticipate the devastating impact of the Everclear shots. Everything came tumbling down after I felt ecstatic after a few double shots. Stumbling into my bedroom, I had an instinct that something was wrong. The death angel, a scary figure, was present. I knew it was coming for me even though I couldn't see or hear it. It was all extremely strange, but I knew this was it because once you join the spiritual realm, everything becomes crystal clear. This realization crushed me to my core, and I sobbed as I clung desperately to my entertainment center. In my childhood, my mother would tell me the parable of the sinful man who, as he lay dying on the cross, begged Jesus to forgive him and then granted him heaven. I felt her words echoing in my soul. Crushing sensation of regret hit me all of a sudden. I stammered something along the lines of, "Oh my, I'm so sorry I messed up," although I knew that the medication had dulled my feelings and made me seem dishonest. I knew in my heart that I was a sinner who deserved hell, so I pleaded with Jesus for pardon. I was in the middle of apologizing when something unexpected happened. Instantaneously, I sprang from my feet and soared into a tunnel. I was ensnared by the death angel and my life took an abrupt turn. No one could escape its clutches. It had a firm grasp on me, perhaps even my spinal column, so fighting back was futile. I became physically bonded to it. As we sped into the tunnel at an incredible speed, I could see a large number of people bound on both sides. As seemingly endless numbers of people appeared at seemingly random intervals, it seemed like time was flying by. Incredible as it may seem, I could instantly understand the motivations, feelings, and identities of any person. The people in this section of the tunnel still couldn't believe it, despite knowing what was happening. Numerous individuals, identifying as Christians, frantically yelled out for mercy. As I was pulled further into the abyss, their confusion and hopelessness mirrored my growing dread. The enchanted souls fettered in the tunnel believed they were being led to paradise. To their astonishment, hell was their prison, and there was no way out. They ignored me in favor of the terrible beast that was dragging me along. They dared to hope that the monster would see their error and save them from certain death. I got to the bottom of their deepest thoughts, and it was clear that deep down they all knew the verdict was fair. It was as if they had discovered their forever house. As far as anybody could tell, God was being fair. In this otherworldly realm, the reality shone through. What they grasped was that God possesses goodness, loves humanity, is morally upright, and administers fair judgments. They knew the verdict had been fair, and there was an inherent sense of acceptance among them. Here, anybody might potentially have access to any data at any moment. We answered all of their queries before the concept could even begin to take shape. They found no solace in their profound understanding of divine truth. Rather, it brought them the shattering knowledge of their inevitable demise. Suddenly, the passageway opened, exposing an enormous, underground room larger than a football stadium. The suffocating stony environment, which resembled red rock or lava rock, validated my notion that we were underground, isolated from the light of day. It was very clear that this was the scene of tremendous pain. An unsettling feeling seemed to fill the air. We came to a sudden halt, and as the dust settled, I beheld a swath of people ambling slowly in a single-file circle. They looked like zombies. Some of them even seemed to be balancing on the backs of other walkers. The majority of their eyes were closed, and a handful of them drooled, giving the impression that they were mesmerized. It was as if they were in the midst of a nightmare, totally unaware of their surroundings. As these spirits wandered by, I watched in awe as the bizarre show unfolded. One particular person caught my attention. He was a terrifying sight, especially in his purple-blue robe. He looked very different from what I was thinking, and it was hard to make sense of it. What followed came the sight of an even more menacing figure. His appearance was reminiscent of someone from my generation, perhaps the mid-90s, rather than the Dangerous Minds era. A recognized figure in the middle of the bizarre landscape. Before I could finish my sentence, he snatched me out of my own thoughts. Every action he took was witnessed by me. Reliving an inappropriate interaction with a youngster in a trance-like condition, he was ensnared in a nightmare cycle. He was damned because his sins kept coming back and there was no way out. Despite his newfound spiritual awareness, it was obvious that this man had given in to the sin described in the Bible. He no longer had any illusions or justifications to escape the perpetual cycle of humiliation and dread. He had fully accepted the wickedness of his actions. Only the crushing shame of damnation and the crushing truth of his own ignorance emerged from it. Hell was waiting for those souls in the almost infinite line of persons who had sinned in some way related to sexual perversion. Whether it was adultery or homosexuality, you were still in a similar position whether you identified as straight or not, and you still had trouble controlling your desires. For these offenses, specific and individual punishments were meted out. Each person became trapped in a vicious cycle that they had created for themselves in this painfully accurate but ultimately pointless recreation of their baser urges. Out of nowhere, the powerful shock coursed through my body. I couldn't tear myself away from the inspiration that propelled me forward because of it. It drew me nearer to a massive subterranean temple as it began to move. Standing tall and imposing like a castle, the building appeared to be crafted from the most precious materials. It was breathtaking to behold, perhaps adorned with precious stones, pearls, or gems. As we approached, I braced myself to slam into the massive wooden doors. Instead, to my astonishment, they opened automatically, letting in a cozy, inviting light from within. I followed the enigmatic impulse that pushed me into the castle, and I couldn't wait to see what more wonders awaited me within. But the glamour of the entrance was soon replaced by a gloomy reality, and my dreams were swiftly dashed. I was escorted down a lengthy hall that was lined with prison cells instead of luxurious chambers. False prophet, whose previously charismatic facade was now exposed, revealed the essence of their lie, stood in each cage. They craved awe and respect because they wanted to be gods. Their false promises of redemption have led countless people astray and into hell. This was their domain, a monument to their ambitions' naivete. The story served as a chilling warning about the dangers of heretical beliefs and the allure of religion aside from true faith. If one's relationship with Jesus is superficial or Christianity is limited to ritual, then Christianity itself can lead them astray. The gospel made it clear that true salvation did not consist in empty rituals or religious arrogance, but rather in a broken spirit humbly submitting to God's grace. As they escorted me down the stone corridor floor, I could see a diverse group of prisoners in the open jail cells. Nobody ever wore an orange monk's robe that I could see there. As I made my way through each cell, I discovered more about the spiritual leaders who had lied to others with their bogus ideas and were now behind bars. One individual in particular stuck out to me. He wore the garb of an American frontiersman from the late 19th and early 20th centuries. He stayed engrossed and unaware of his surroundings despite the potential of walking free, even if his cell door was ajar. The white American false prophet Joseph Smith lived in the 1800s and founded the Mormon religion. Due to my continued strong connection to the spirit realm, I was able to determine his identity. And just like that, I was a part of his universe. Standing in a sunlit field surrounded by lush long grass, could hear the birdsong and feel the gentle touch of the breeze. As soon as I stepped foot on earth again, the nightmares of hell faded from my mind. Realization that this was all a mirage came to me only when the false prophet was standing behind me. As he looked down at the grass, a flood of comforting memories washed over him. Through him, I felt his passion as if it were my own. He hurried over to a 2-story building that appeared to be a plain white barn. Throughout this time, remained stationary, planning my return home. Then again, I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister was lurking upstairs because of the eerie sound it was making. For no other reason than pure curiosity, I began to investigate the source of the noise. However, as I was about to delve deeper into my investigation, the Death Angel's grip tightened and hurriedly pulled me toward the house. As I braced for impact, the sky went pitch black, and I lost all feeling in my extremities. As I slipped through solid material, time appeared to stand still. I had the sensation that I was falling into an endless abyss. At last, a soft light came on, and I found myself whisked away to a room filled with countless beautiful antiques. I had just passed through a wall when it hit me. My temporary blindness and deafness were the result of that. It was all quite perplexing. From my periphery, I caught sight of 2 hideous creatures. Their excessive hunches and bulbous snail-like bodies made these demons look like the hunchback of Notre Dame. They looked like alligators, and their yellow eyes sparkled with evil. As soon as I heard them arguing in their strange accent, I instinctively covered my ears to drown out the awful sound. I was in the middle of a telepathic discussion with one of the demons when suddenly one of them locked eyes with me. I silently declined to comply with the demon's request that the guy downstairs, the false prophet I had brought with me, come up, and the demon glanced away and paid me no heed. Concurrently, I noticed the man who was hesitating outside the door, his uneasiness rising as he experienced déjà vu, and was hesitant to approach the house. The demons, anxious to drag him inside, let out a piercing howl in their horrible tongue. Something akin to a luminous angel or a dark square suddenly materialized in the room and began to expand into a celestial entity. Despite my first reluctance, I was spellbound by this celestial beauty, this radiant being adorned in shimmering gold. Its androgynous shape caused me to experience conflicting emotions. Suddenly, it signaled to the 2 demons flanking me to do something. With rapid and unfaltering obedience, they dashed out of sight through the wall. Some shadowy figure ran away from me. From within the golden being rose a hypnotic melody that seemed to reach beyond the range of human hearing. Its mesmerizing music had a way of putting people to sleep. The false prophet scrambled up the stairs as the heavy door banged shut below. As if he had encountered this heavenly tune before, he rushed to the source, tears streaming down his face. His love to the celestial being was infectious, and his closeness to it was plain to see. As he was enchanted by the song and lost in memories of their previous encounters, the man knelt down in worship. When he looked at this golden creature, he saw something divine, something worthy of admiration and devotion. Helping the man to his feet and encouraging him to stand up, the golden angel tried to be sympathetic, even though he clearly wasn't impressed by the man's performance. With a single gesture, the barriers separated, revealing a gigantic audience reminiscent of a music festival. From what I could discern, the golden creature was guiding the man ahead, entrusting him with the sacred task of communicating a message. While the guy spoke, the angel alternated between his hands, passing golden hieroglyphs that lit up and changed in response to his words. The haunting image evoked thoughts of the mystique surrounding ancient Egypt. However, a change took place. With a sinister grin, the once glorious angel became a monstrous monster. In the light, his once charismatic eyes took on a terrible hue, and his pointed teeth shimmered. The sound of cursing could be discerned among the spectators below, a discordant tone amidst this otherworldly spectacle. The air was electric with hatred as the mob below pelted the false prophet with a torrent of hate speech and insults. They proclaimed their vengeance on the one who had misled them and damned them to damnation with an audible outcry. It was crystal plain what they wanted, for the guy responsible for their suffering to climb down from his perch. The stage preacher abruptly ceased speaking as the cacophony of voices became too much to bear. Concern slowly spread across his face as he realized how terrible the situation was. Because of his insatiable need for approval and attention, he used to take great pleasure in the applause of the crowd. As he saw the doomed suffer, it was heartbreaking to see his feeble attempts to grab small victories. Then, his face showing signs of unease, he looked suddenly to the edge of the platform. As it began to shake violently, it appeared as though a powerful windstorm was tearing the house apart. As the terror began to build, I had an overpowering want to flee for my life. The death angel yanked me back as I prepared to act, sending me soaring into lunar orbit where I could observe the house crumbling below. At the back of the throng, people began to disperse in order to make way for the procession. The minister was the target of a mysterious black streak that snaked its way through the congregation. The alligator demons led a large group of the false prophet's relatives forward, one of which was a little girl dressed in a dress and holding a teddy bear. On seeing her, the prophet felt utter defeat. Her cries pierced his wounded spirit, and I could feel his profound sorrow and compassion as she yelled, "Daddy, why did you lie to us? We'll never get out of here." As he felt the crushing weight of hopelessness that the situation imposed on him, I could relate. We were both physically nauseous from the crushing despair that seemed like it could engulf us completely. Following that, we ended up, much to his surprise, on his front lawn. Looking across at him, saw that he was kneeling down and running his fingers through the grass. When he said, "Is it real grass?" the awful truth struck me at that very moment. This was only the first step in an endless cycle of misery. I was whisked back into the hallway of that fortress-like structure, where I once again observed him humming quietly to himself in the corner, his eyes fluttering back as if he were entranced. For one last look, I met his gaze, and then the death angel began to drag me forward. The amount of data was too much for my brain to process. Finally, it hit me. A final level of excruciating worry. "Cody, this piece is now yours." It was as if I had reached a new terror level, and my senses were all heightened. My resistance was as futile as being hitched to a semi. I knew it would do nothing to free myself, but when I found out that this item was going to be mine, an even more fundamental desire came to the surface. Screamed and kicked and gave it my all as my body burst in unimaginable terror. An overwhelming sense of fear washed over them, as if the intensity of human feeling had no limits. As a result of my extreme fear, my screams appeared to never end. Then, a brilliant, all-encompassing light overwhelmed me. In that instant, I felt like I had entered paradise. As if from up high, Jesus' glowing arms reached down and lifted me to my feet, hugging me from every direction. I was sucked out of the chaos and back to my bedroom in Fountain, Colorado. In an instant, what had happened had rattled me to my very core, and I couldn't make sense of it. Went a whole week without eating and didn't speak since I was in such a daze. During that period, I confided in no one save my wife. She set out at about noon, and returned at around 4 in the afternoon. Played the role of a babysitter. Mere few hours had passed, but it felt like 4 days had passed since my ordeal began. It seemed like time was standing still. Han returning home from work, she was jubilant and overjoyed about the new puppy. She rushed to the bedroom to fill me in on everything as I was still in shock from what had transpired. As she barged into the room, I became very angry. "Get away from me," I said, forcefully pushing her out the door. Having to deal with other people is just too much for me to handle at the moment. My mind was racing to the point that I would have a panic attack. My worst fear came true, that I had died and gone to hell. My thoughts were consumed by the following. "The next time your heart stops, Cody, you'll go to hell for real." For the following 12 years, as my life plummeted, I felt as though the enemy had me snatched from under his thumb. With the help of alcohol and drugs, I was trying to numb the pain of my existence. Afterwards, a peculiar series of circumstances unfolded one day in Dallas, Oregon. I was stranded in the basement because the coffee shop owner had connections to my future family, which I was completely unaware of. While the owner was away on vacation, my future wife, father-in-law, and mother-in-law were there, even though I didn't know them at the time. I happened to overhear a conversation about salvation between my future father-in-law and another man he had brought along. Even though I considered myself to be an expert in the Bible, I was overtaken by a sense of hopelessness. I was deeply moved by the words of my future father-in-law, which were drawn from the Song of Solomon. He assured us that God's love for us is unchanging, regardless of our transgressions. This insight caused me to question my long-held beliefs. After a while had gone, and I thought I understood the Bible well, but as I thought about his points, I realized I had missed or misread a few verses. In an otherwise desolate setting, my father-in-law's words shone a light by countering the lies the enemy had put in my mind. This renewed sense of hope was something I began to embrace gradually. I went back to Bible studies and started seeking God's truth with renewed passion. Finally, I conquered my addiction and started living my life to the fullest. Can't deny the role my father-in-law played in guiding me to the truth, even though I owe everything to Jesus. His words and deeds showed me that no matter how far I had strayed, God's mercy and love were always within reach. Speaking with a person who has experienced death firsthand is the best approach to gain insight on the hereafter. The Bible is accurate in its depiction of hell and the retribution it holds for drunks. The truth remains unchanged regardless of your belief or lack thereof. The truth is objective, regardless of who you ask. My death, damnation, and resurrection provide credence to the teachings of the patriarchs and the Bible. God will never abandon us, regardless of our level of disloyalty. Gratitude surpasses judgment in His sight. It is true that there is both a paradise and a hell. Forever damned to damnation awaits those who reject Jesus Christ's atoning sacrifice. I felt an earthquake while in hell and knew that the ground was splitting open to let more souls in. To be observing this, you must be completely bonkers. Every word that is written in the Bible is true. I have risen from the dead just to inform you of this. Thanks for listening to today's testimony. It would mean a lot if you could subscribe and give it a thumbs up if you haven't already. Leave your comments in the box provided. Typical practice is that the video's description may include citations to the first testimony. Hopefully, you will be able to make it to the next one. I hope the Lord is with you every step of the way.